Today's roadshow will provide all of you, especially the business community, the critical information on the trade fair, its relevance to Africa's transformation and integration ambitions, and the opportunities it presents for Nigerian businesses to expand their footprints across the continent. I know Nigeria is a big market, but there are markets outside of Nigeria that businesses can take advantage of. The third edition, as you are aware and has been stated, will hold in Cairo, Egypt between the 9th to 15th of November 2023. One of the main expected outcomes of this roadshow is to showcase the immense benefits and opportunities that the fair holds and to encourage the Nigerian public and private sector to actively participate and take advantage of the opportunities to grow and expand their businesses, drive intra-African trade, and support economic integration under the African Continental Free Trade Area. Indeed, the timing of this roadshow and the theme selected is particularly apt, given the milestones we as a continent celebrate this year. This year marks the 60th anniversary of the African Unity under the Organization of African Unity and the African Union. This year also is the year of the AFCFTA. AU heads of state in February this year adopted acceleration of the African Continental Free Trade Area implementation, acceleration of the AFCFTA implementation as a theme, as Africa's theme of the year 2023. 2023 also marks the 30th anniversary of Afrexim Bank, an institution established to drive Africa's growth and prosperity through trade, and an institution that is championing the implementation of the AFCFTA, an institution that has become systemically relevant to this continent, to its transformation agenda. The significance of these milestones cannot be overstated, and their confluence today should serve as a reminder of both the tremendous progress we have made as a continent, but also the challenges that we are still yet to overcome. Ladies and gentlemen, recent global events have exposed Africa's continued exposure and vulnerability to the dictates of external partners. When emergencies struck in the form of COVID-19, we discovered that Africa had limited or even no capacity to produce even the most basic medical necessities like personal protective equipment. The continent scrambled to secure even the simplest of products like face masks and hand sanitizers. When the vaccines arrived, Africa was marginalized, finding itself at the back of the queue, despite having money to procure vaccines. More recently, when food crisis emerged on the back of the Ukrainian conflict and commodity prices surged, we found shortages even among rich African households. These, among other aspects, exposed our collective vulnerability and inability to respond in times of crisis, despite having attained mass independence in the 1960s. Indeed, the message by the great Pan-Africanist and the father of African independence, Kwame Nkrumah, who prophetically stated, and I quote, "Independence is only the prelude to a new and more involved struggle for the right to conduct our own economic and social affairs." I think I'll take it again. Independence, I guess political independence at the time, is only the prelude to a new and more involved struggle for the right to conduct our own economic and social affairs. This statement, made over 60 years ago, continues to ring eerily true today. It underlines the position that despite attaining political independence, Africa's emancipation was far from complete, and the battle for economic independence still lies ahead. The battle continues to rage and makes it imperative for us to work collectively to find African solutions to African problems facing our continent. 60 years ago, at the meeting of the then Organization of African Unity, our leaders in those nascent days of African political independence, had the foresight and vision to recognize that the journey to economic independence was still ahead and required deliberate actions. Among the others, they called for, at that time, in 1963, establishing a free trade area between the various African countries. They also called for a restructuralization of African international trade. What did they mean by that? That we need to, change the structure of our trade, the structure of exporting raw materials, and, to countries outside the continent, and in turn importing finished products. Developing trade, they also called for developing trade among African countries by the organization and participation of African trade fairs and exhibitions, and by the African trade fairs and exhibitions. They did try. The first one was held in 1972 under the first trade fair. It was called the All Africa Trade Fair, was held in 1972 under the auspices of President Jomo Kenyatta. But it didn't go far enough. They also called for the granting of transport and transit facilities. And finally, the establishment of an African Payments and Clearing Union. 60 years on, this vision is being translated into reality with the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The reorientation towards greater intra-African trade and integration, the creation of an intra-African trade fair, or the recreation of an intra-African trade fair, now under the auspices of the African Export-Import Bank and partners like the AFCFTA Secretariat and African Union Commission, as well as the establishment of the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, PAPS, and Afrexim Bank's Africa Collaborative Transit Guarantee System. Perhaps the key demonstration of ensuring that we take our collective destiny in our hands is the establishment of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. The AFCFTA is a clear signal of the political will and the desire to reverse the trend of external reliance and commodity dependence, and to ensure that as a continent, we take our collective destiny in our hands. It is for this success, it is for the success of the AFCFTA that the IATF, that the PAPS, that the Transit Guarantee Scheme, and all other several initiatives have been developed. At Afrexim Bank, we see the AFCFTA as a game-changing initiative that will allow us to reverse engineer the colonial strategy that I just mentioned a few seconds ago, of extracting raw materials and dumping manufacturers in return. A strategy that saw economic policy in Africa being reduced to rudimentary procedures of gathering crops and bartering them, and ensuring that our countries do not trade with their neighbors. We must ride on the AFCFTA and the collective will of our leaders and all African people. Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the historic agreement establishing the AFCFTA was signed in 2018 and entered into force on the 30th of May 2019. To date, the AFCFTA has been signed by 54 out of the 55 AU member states and ratified by 47 African state parties. And trading under this historic agreement commenced on 1st January 2021. This agreement, the FCFTA, or the area, creates the world's largest free trade area since the creation of the World Trade Organization by number of participating states. United as a single market, the FCFTA creates a market of 1.4 billion people with a combined GDP of over 3.5 trillion US dollars. But note this, with a business and consumer spending estimated to reach 6.7 billion by 2030. It will serve as the backdrop for a deeper economic integration and economic emancipation, the AFCFTA, that is. It will pave the way for increased investment in productive sectors, enhance trade linkages between African member states, and drive the structural transformation of our economies. However, its success requires more than a legal framework for liberalizing trade. It requires deliberate actions to connect African markets and exchange information, deliberate actions to facilitate the movement of goods, and the payments of such goods, and bold and innovative financial instruments that empower us to reduce our reliance on primary commodities and develop industrial and technological capacity that will drive sustainable development. It is for this reason that Afreximbank has made intra-African trade and implementation of the AFCFTA, as well as industrialization and export development, the key priorities under our 5th strategic plan that ended in 2021 and our current 6th strategic plan. This is a recognition that our development ambitions are intrinsically linked to enhancing trade amongst ourselves and ensuring that Africa moves forward, or moves up, rather, moves up the value chains in a global economy dominated already by manufactured goods. Promoting intra-African trade and implementation of the AFCFTA agreement, therefore, remains the arrowhead of Afreximbank's 6th strategic plan dubbed Impact 2026, extending the frontiers. To optimize the benefits of the AFCFTA agreement and support its implementation, we have put in place at Afreximbank a range of financing and facilitation products and initiatives in its support. And among them, and perhaps one of the most important, is the Intra-African Trade Fair. Distinguished guests, among the biggest constraints confronting intra-African trade is the issue of information asymmetry. We remain unaware of the trade and investment opportunities that exist amongst each other. Yet we are more aware of those that exist outside the continent. If I were to ask a Ghanaian, there may not be one here, but who knows, a Ghanaian footwear manufacturer to source leather is most likely to look to New Zealand, South America for supply. Yet, countries like Nigeria, Ethiopia, Burundi, and Sudan have the supply capacity to meet this demand. If I were to ask an Ivorian retailer to procure apparel, she will most likely turn to Vietnam or Bangladesh. Yet, Lesotho, Kenya, and many others, even Ethiopia again, have thriving apparel industries. West Africa alone, if I should go on, imports meat products worth more than $3 billion annually from Argentina and Australia. But meat is abundant on this continent. South Africa, Botswana, Zambia, Mali, Namibia, Chad, Sudan. They can supply a large proportion of this demand. Well, how is a trader supposed to know? How are they supposed to know about these opportunities? How is a trader here in Lagos to know the needs of a consumer in Lusaka? And by the way, I often wonder, why are Nigerian traders bypassing the Travel Egypt Air and go on to Guangzhou, Shenzhen for the things that Egypt produces? How is a clothing manufacturer in Lesotho going to know that a thriving apparel market exists in Burkina Faso as well? To overcome this dearth of trade and market information and support the implementation of the AFCFTA, the bank started working. This is the reason we started the trade fair with the African Union and other strategic plans, and launched the Intra-African Trade Fair in 2018. Or dare I say, relaunched it. The IATF, which holds every 2 years, is a platform to do exactly what I just highlighted, to connect buyers and sellers across the continent, as well as investors to investment opportunities within the continent, and to address the access to trade and market information, which is a key enabler for intra-African trade, as I just highlighted. The IATF, the trade fair, has now emerged as the premier trade and investment event on the continent today. It is the biggest platform for African public and private sector interactions in one gathering. It has gained momentum and support at the continental level and has been endorsed by the African Union heads of state and government. Underscoring the high importance of the IATF as a continental initiative, the African Union Summit in 2023, as I mentioned earlier, just for emphasis, approved the theme of the year as the acceleration of the implementation of the AFCFTA. The IATF is the marketplace for the AFCFTA. Your Excellencies, Afrexim Bank is not only spearheading the IATF to support the AFCFTA, but we are also at the forefront of supporting African trade. And we have developed a number of financing and facilitation instruments to support trade, to support your trade, and to support your investments. Time is fast spent and may not allow me to go through all of them, but I'll just try a few, because I think I like to use this platform to pass on some information that will be useful to Nigerian businesses. So we at the bank intend to double our financing of intra-African trade to $40 billion on a revolving basis by 2026, up from $20 billion. Between 2017 and 2021, we disbursed $20 billion for intra-African trade alone on a revolving basis. Intra-African trade and investments. We have developed practical interventions to facilitate investments under the trade and investment under the AFCFTA. We are also working with the AFCFTA Secretariat to put in place an AFCFTA adjustment fund to facilitate and provide support through financing, technical assistance, grants, and compensation funding to AFCFTA parties, but also private enterprises to adapt to and effectively participate in the AFCFTA. The board of Afrexim Bank approved and committed $1 billion to support the funding of this initiative, and actually offered a $10 million grant that will facilitate the establishment and operationalization of the fund. It is open to private sector businesses who want to retool, expand, to take advantage of the opportunities. We're also partnering with the AFCFTA Secretariat and the AU to ensure the effective implementation or the successful implementation of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, PAPS, with a view to facilitating the payments and settlements of trade transactions in local currencies. This will address the challenge of currency inconvertibility and foreign exchange shortages that hamper intra-African trade across our continent. It will also deal with the issue of the informality of trade and help for policy intervention. The system achieved a successful pilot in West African Monetary Zone and was officially launched last year in January in Accra, Ghana. It now has a network of 9 banks. It was piloted in WAM's region, but it now has a network of 9 banks, 73 commercial banks, and 7 switches. It will allow a Nigerian importer from Egypt to pay in Naira, while the Egyptian exporter will receive Egyptian pounds almost immediately. Afrexim Bank is also leveraging digitalization through the African Trade Gateway, which is a digital ecosystem to facilitate intra-African trade. It comprises an integrated and functional specific set of platforms that will help surmount impediments in cross-border trade. I mentioned PAPS already. There is a Mansa platform, which is a KYC platform. We have a trader club, a member-driven network of international businesses and executives. It's also, again, to deal with the issue of trade and market information. Being a member of Trader Club means that you can have access to trade information, markets across Africa, where to source raw materials, and so on and so forth, and even trade regulations. We have the African Trade Exchange, which is a business-to-business, business-to-government platform that brings together African buyers and sellers of goods underpinned by the AFCFTA rules of origin. Well, I already talked about the transit guarantee earlier, which is a scheme that will ensure seamless transportation of goods across multiple borders through the issuance of a single technology-enabled transit bond. What that means is that if you're transporting your goods from Nigeria to Mauritania, you don't have to post bonds on every border, as it is today. This scheme by Afrexim Bank is backed by a $1 billion commitment provided by the bank, and is currently being implemented in the Comesa region as a pilot. The analysis we did shows that full implementation of this transit guarantee scheme will lead to cost savings of more than $300 million per year. We have also created an African Trade Facilitation Program. We call it AFTRAF, through which we are forging partnership, very strong partnership with African commercial banks. Some of the financial institutions, if not all in this country, have benefited from our AFTRAF. We've established partnerships with around 500 of Africa's 600 commercial banks. It is actually the single largest network globally. And we're well on our way to grant about $8 billion of letters of of credit confirmation lines to these banks. We are making sure that in every African country, in everyone, there is a bank that can open LCs and make or receive payments with respect to intra-African trade. The bank is also working with the African Association of Automotive Manufacturers, the African Union, and the AFCFTA Secretariat to develop a viable automotive industry in Africa. In this context, Afrexim Bank has developed a $1 billion global automotive financing facility for the automotive industry. And we're also providing support in terms of facilitating the development of regional value chains and implementation of a continental strategy that was adopted by trade ministers early this year. As I go on, the bank is also working with the International Trade Center to train African companies, including SMEs, on how to export under the AFCFTA. This is a practical training program which provides trade and market information to assist businesses to identify export opportunities, how to comply with export requirements under the AFCFTA, as well as how to access finance, payments, and settlement, among others. It even talks about things about standards, packaging, and what have you. We're also supporting SMEs and women and youth to also participate and benefit from the AFCFTA. We have a range of instruments such as our SME development program, which focuses on capacity building, but also financing through intermediaries. We have our factoring initiative. Next month in October, we'll be back here again on our annual trade finance seminar, which will focus on trade finance, the financial institutions, and various stakeholders in financing, as well as factoring and project finance. This, I think, is on between the 3rd and 6th of October, next month. And then we have our creative industry platform. I'm glad Mr. Senator Ben Bruce just walked in. He's the co-chair of our creative advisory group. And it has seen us, we call it CANEX. CANEX has seen us support film production. Fashion designers are now able to showcase their talents and their wares in Portugal, in fashion shows in Portugal and Paris. And we even have pop-up stores at the Rockefeller building, all in faraway Manhattan in the USA, among others. Specifically, we have supported Nigeria's film industry. Just a few days ago, probably 2 days ago, one of the films we supported premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival. These are just a few of the initiatives and instruments. There are a whole lot that we're using to support the continental integration under the AFCFTA. However, the full potential of the AFCFTA will remain a mere vision if we do not take deliberate steps, especially as businesses and the public sector, to promote trade, create structures, and trade facilitation measures to ensure real gains for the African continent. Having sent the context and highlighted some of the bank's interventions to support African trade, allow me to once again turn back to the trade fair, IATF 2023, and why it makes sense for you to participate. The inaugural trade fair held in Cairo, Egypt in 2018 was a resounding success. This was followed by even a more successful one, at least in our own estimation, that held in Durban, South Africa in 2021. Collectively, the two editions of the trade fair saw participants from 130 countries globally, with more than 2,500 exhibitors from 77 countries. The two previous editions generated over $74 billion in trade and investment deals, providing a glimpse of the immense potential that exists for intra-African trade and investments. Nigeria directly benefited from trade and investment deals worth over $18 billion. As you can imagine, that's a quarter of the deals closed. Building on this success, of the success of the previous two editions, IATF 2023 promises to even be bigger and better. It is scheduled to hold in Cairo, Egypt from 9th to 15th of November 2023, and will again provide an opportunity for exhibitors to showcase their goods and services, engage in B2B and B2G exchanges and conclude deals. We financiers will be there to facilitate the closure and financing of those deals. Preparations and mobilization efforts for IATF 20 are on course, and we are poised to attract more than 1,600 exhibitors from over 75 countries. We also expect 35,000 participants, half of which are expected physically from all African countries and the rest of the world, including the diaspora. We anticipate that IATF will also generate in trade and investment deals, and we're anticipating about $43 billion. In addition to the exhibition, IATF 2023 will also feature a world-leading trade and investment forum, which provides an opportunity for the public and private sector to debate policies and find practical solutions to challenges faced by the private sector, including SMEs, women, and youth. It is also a platform to showcase Africa's creative talents and opportunities through our Creative Africa Nexus, CANEX program. We'll also have the dedicated auto forum, Diaspora Day, and a youth startup program. We're also taking the IATF to Africa. We're also taking the IATF 2023 to Africa and the world through an IATF virtual platform which will allow exhibitors to showcase their goods and services and engage with potential clients in a digital environment, and that can continue even after the physical trade fair is done and dusted. The bank has developed an African buyers program. This is to reorient African buyers and importers to encourage them to buy African products. At IATF, we are targeting to mobilize more than 500 buyers. We urge all buyers in Nigeria to enroll to the African Buyers Program and participate in IATF, and also benefit from the trade financing, trade facilitation, and advisory and market intelligence services provided. On the program today, there will be a more detailed IATF presentation, which will provide additional information on the trade fair. It will also take you through the process on how to register and take up exhibition spaces, become a sponsor, participate in whatever form you deem necessary to be a part of this important event. We call, therefore, on the government of Nigeria, the states and FCT, the banks and private sector associations to provide support in terms of mobilizing the Nigerian business community, including women-owned businesses and SMEs, to participate and take advantage of all that the trade fair has to offer. A unique platform for Nigerian businesses to access an integrated African market. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite you as I close to join us at IATF 2023 as sponsors and exhibitors as we work together to realize the vision of an integrated and prosperous Africa, and as the largest economy in Africa. I'm confident that Nigeria will again be strongly represented in Cairo. Nigeria must lead the charge of African trade. Recall, let me just think of the Ella Fortes mentioned something in her poetry. She says, remember, this is Africa. Opportunity doesn't come knocking at you. You go look for it. In this particular instance, opportunity is looking for you. We're knocking on your doors. I look forward to seeing you at IATF 2023.